one of the challenges when working with AI is making sure it doesn't forget and it draws only in the information that we wanted to see at any given moment in time. So this is the context window and managing what is inside of that context window. So inside of what it can see at this specific moment in time. So that when I work on one specific project, it has this project's information in the context window and not the project we worked on yesterday. Plus, it should have our instructions and, of course, the chat history and any documents we provided within this context. So there is different ways of solving this, and I want to show you today my second brain setup that I have created. It's an external solution. So I have my knowledge base in a folder on my desktop, and the big labs have tried to solve this. So let's have a look at that first. In the ChatGPT app, you have a place in your settings for personalization. You can see that mine is empty, and that is because I have an external way of where to find instructions about me. But if you were to use a desktop version, you could put here some instructions about you, and you could also put on memory. Again, we don't know what it memorizes, and I find this instructions very limited here. So I think there's a better way to do it, but this is where natively you would find that. And then you can also work within projects in ChatGPT, and this is when you point it towards a certain folder. It uses that information from that folder as a project information. So you could have a folder with documents, and then that would be the project context. What I do here, you can already see, I just plug my second brain folder into it, and then that contains all the instructions. So instructions about how I want to work with the AI, but also instructions on my projects. And I will show you in a minute how that works. In Claude, it's very similar. And the whole point of this presentation is also to see that they all just cook with water. It's all very similar. So here in Claude settings, again, we have a field for instructions where you can put information on what is important to you when working together with Claude. And there should also be a memory function somewhere. Again, I have turned this off. It's down here, because I don't want it to just save random memory bits somewhere. I want to be able to very clearly direct and curate the memory that I want it to save, and I want to be able to see and edit and manage that memory, which I cannot do here within Claude and within any of the big labs native solutions. It's really just a big black box, and the instructions are very limited space of what you can give here. Within Claude, of course, you probably know this, for the projects, you can also give separate project instructions. This will make more sense in a minute when I show you the second brain setup, because you will see these instructions also in the second brain. Gemini has something a little bit similar. Try to do it with the gems, of course, which is a knowledge base that you can then query, but not personal instructions that serve for your collaboration with the model. And then in Claude, as with every agentic platform, I can connect my folder here. And as soon as I do that, it has all the information about me, instructions, my projects. So I don't need to fill out these fields because all the instructions are inside my second brain. Now, what is a second brain? It's just a folder structure on your desktop. It's how any good manager would probably structure their files anyway. So I will quickly take you through mine. I have at the root level, and I'm syncing mine through iCloud because it's in Obsidian, but that's a small detail, not important here. This can also be on your desktop. I advise to use underscores and not have any spaces in the second brain folder name. And then on the first level, you can see an AGENTS.md and a CLAUDE.md. This is simply for the purpose that OpenAI models work with an AGENTS.md, and Claude works with a CLAUDE.md. Gemini works with a Gemini.md. But what these are fundamental instructions of how you want to work together. So the information that we can put here into the settings field, the instructions for Claude, is exactly what we can find here in the Claude.md. And similarly, the instructions that are here inside of personalization in ChatGPT are the custom instructions in your AGENTS.md. All we do here by writing our own AGENTS.md and our own Claude.md is to give the model instructions and also give it the opportunity to keep this file updated by itself. So every time now when we say, keep this in mind, or put it into your AGENTS.md or into your Claude.md, it will be able, because it's inside the second brain folder and it has read and write access to the second brain folder, it will be able to update its own memory, its own instructions that you created together in the beginning. That is why I keep this empty. And we call this the root AGENTS.md or the root Claude.md. And I did a little trick here. I created an alias from one of the files, in this case from the AGENTS.md, and I just renamed it Claude.md. So when you point Claude to a folder and it sees a Claude.md, it will automatically assume that these are its instructions that usually live here in the settings. And likewise, when ChatGPT or your OpenAI model sees an AGENTS.md, it will assume and immediately take those instructions on board as if it were written inside of your personalization here. And I found that this way around works a little bit better. So have the AGENTS.md be the main file, and then the Claude.md is just the alias of the AGENTS.md. It seems that both of the models are a little bit less confused this way. I had it the other way around before, and even though I now work mainly with Claude and just use GPT as support, but still it just seems that this way around is better. So what exactly can we find in AGENTS.md? And I want to speak about this MD format a little bit for those who don't know about that. It's a Markdown file. Markdown is a text file with a little bit of formatting inside, but it's very, very small. And Markdown is the LLM, so the large language model's favorite language. So whenever they see a Markdown file, it's really easy for them to read it, and they just get along with it really easy, and they can ingest it really easily. And it's very token efficient. It doesn't need many tokens because it's really just a text file with a little bit of formatting. So for example, here is my AGENTS.md, but if I look at my AGENTS.md in a Markdown reader, which would be, for example, Obsidian, you can then see, and this is my good morning skill, we come to that later, but you can see that there's some formatting built in by hashtags and dashes and stars and whatnot. But once you look at it in a Markdown reader, it actually looks really nice. This is why people use Obsidian. It's a free Markdown reader. We come to that in a little bit. But one thing you can already see here is that because I pointed Obsidian to my second brain folder, you can see my folder structure in here. And at the same time, when I point GPT to my second brain folder, when I go to files, you can see also the folder structure here. So what I'm trying to say is no matter where you look at it, it's all basically the same thing, and every model can work with that. What else should be in an AGENTS.md? So when I work with people for an individual setup, I have a onboarding process where Claude, or depending who you want to work with, or ChatGPT will take you through an interview process, and it will create the AGENTS.md for you. So I have instructions for Claude or for Codex to interview you, and this is what will then go into your Claude.md. So some things it always should know about you. What do you want it to do? Who are you? What are your rules and your communication style? What are your projects? What are your goals? What is your pace? And once you went through this interview, Claude will generate this Claude.md. So you don't need to do this yourself. You just answer some questions and Claude will generate this for you. And I have a similar process for Codex. And then I have a template here. So this is the structure of a Claude.md. Who am I? What's this role? What are the rules? So kind of like filling in the interview questions that we just discussed. And then this is kind of the structure it has. It also has a reference to the folder structure, so it can find its way around. So the AGENTS.md or Claude.md will always be in the memory because it is at the root level. It will always lie in the brain, in the context of your large language model, but it's really small. It's only 19 kilobits. So this is not many tokens. Tokens are words, right? Tokens, every token is like, I think like 0.7 of an English word. And this is not exactly how it works, but just for reference, every word needs a certain amount of tokens. Shorter words, less token, and longer words, more tokens. And the more frequently a word is used, especially in English language, the more token efficient it would be. But long story short, this doesn't take up any space, but this will make sure that this information, this basic instructions are always in the LLM's brain so it can act upon it when working with you. And then from here, when it starts working, it would first load it AGENT.md, Claude.md, and then you tell it what project you want to work on. And because it has an active project index in the AGENTS.md or Claude.md, it will then know when I direct it with questions about my Japan trip 2026, it knows that there's a project about that. And then it will go into the projects and it will find this project. And then we can keep working from here. So again, the Obsidian is just a viewer. So you will find this same folder structure. Of course, in projects, you have all of your projects. And then in my setup, I have a new project skill. It's also something I have included in when I do individual setups for people. So it will set up a project for you and it will follow in the project's folder structure your process of how this project should be tackled. But you can, of course, also set up your own new project skills. So just think about what is important to you when you start a new project. In mine, for example, I have a to-do list in every single project, so I can keep track of what needs to be done. And then what's important is that in every project is a project AGENTS.md and Claude.md alias, which is the same as your project description. When you create a new project, this is what becomes project AGENTS.md or Claude.md. Another important component of the second brain is your skills folder. So skills have a certain format unified across all the labs. So no matter if I point a Claude agent or OpenAI agent to this, it will be able to read this skill.md. Again, it's a Markdown file, so I can just read it. And to read it, it's best to go into my Markdown reader here. And then I can see, for example, here my new project skill, and I can just read through it. And I can just talk to the AI and tell him what I want, and then it will create that for me. And skills should always have a little description in the top and a definition of when the skill is being evoked. And in your AGENTS.md, there will also be an overview of what skills you have. And it is only this top part that will become part of the context window. So that is loaded into the context window in the beginning. And here it says when the skill should be invoked. And then the model will only call upon the skill and read the rest of it once you're actually using the skill. That is why this description is important. What else? Some more folders that I have that I think are good is a notes folder for anything personal. This can be my voice, where it knows how I speak. I gave it a bunch of emails that I thought were good, and it created a little voice guide from that. So whenever I wanted to write an email for me or to a social media post, I can ask it to write that in my voice, and then it will look at this document and sound much more like I would talk. In journals, I have my daily logs. This is a really important part of working with a second brain because, like I said, you have the chat window and that is your context and that is what the model will remember. But we always have to make sure the context window doesn't get so full. And the fuller it gets, the more expensive the conversation will also become. So the more tokens, every time you respond to it, the more tokens it will use, because when you respond to a model within a chat, it doesn't just send your response. It sends your response, including every single thing that you said in this chat, every document you sent in this chat, it will send that back to the model. So it will send the full context back with your response. So when your window is pretty full and you've had a pretty long conversation and you even just say okay, it will actually not just send that okay, it will send all your previous responses, all your previous documents, everything you have said within this one chat, it will send that with it, with your okay back up. So this can become very expensive. And then of course, everything that the model responds to you also eats up tokens. So you should try to keep your context windows at maybe 40 to 60%. Now, you probably ask, how do I know? Because honestly, with the desktop apps, it's a little bit hard to even see how full your context is. And there's a pretty sneaky way, actually, of the labs to get you pay for your tokens and to use your usage and make you run out of usage pretty quickly. And let's go into an older conversation. For example, I built my sister's website this morning over coffee. It's possible. It's really awesome too. So for ChatGPT, you just type status. And now I can see I still have 33% left. So that means I have used 67% of my context already. That is pretty full. That is why I said now handoff. And what handoff is a skill. And what the handoff skill does is, and it's a little bit like the memory function that they try to put here into the settings. But what handoff does is it looks at your chat and it logs everything into your daily log. So we should now see, because I did this today, when we actually look at today's daily log, I hope I don't disclose any secrets here. But looking at today's log, we should see that this is the log for this window. This is what it did when it logged. And now I have kind of like a change log in my daily logs. And of course, I have also documentation about what was done inside my project. And so I can absolutely archive this chat and no information is lost. So if I now create a new chat, and I say, let's send out the contact formula, and I can write English, German, it doesn't matter. Email for my sister. I can see here it, because I have the project here, which is just one of my projects, right? Judith is my sister. So I have connected this chat to this folder, and now it should know what to do with this information. I'm not giving any more context. It's a completely fresh window, but it now knows to look because it is connected to this folder, and it's probably loading this project's AGENTS.md. It knows what we are talking about. It sees there's a website folder, and so it understands the context of what we're doing. And if not, it always knows to look into the daily logs. And there you see is my sister's website, and it's already doing some stuff. It's now actually using computer use in the background. Pretty awesome. It's using my browser. And yeah, actually this was one to do that still needed to be done. And then when we want to work with Claude, at the same time, if we have a little plan there, we can also connect the second brain there, and it's a completely fresh chat. And I can just say like, what's on my to-do list for today? And again, Claude will now be able to see my second brain. It sees there's an AGENTS.md. It sees there is a to-do list there, and it can look at the daily logs, and it can load the to-do lists from the projects and just find what needs to be done. In Claude, if you want to understand where you're at with your context window, here you actually have, it's like a little skill here. It's a command. So you say context. The disadvantage with Claude is, for Claude, it's like a command. So you always have to wait until it's done, and only then it will read out the context for you. And it's part of the conversation. While with ChatGPT, you can have that little status bar always running here. And you can see this was a fresh window. It only loaded, it did some computer use and loaded the project. So that ate up 21%. But we still have 79 left. So try to stay 40 to 60%. When you're 40 to 60% full, so when you have 40 to 60% left, you should definitely do a handoff. And the way I work with ChatGPT is I create projects from all my different project folders, and then I can create chats within the project folder, and I just do handoff to archive these chats. Within Claude, I have to plug the folder in here, and then I can see where I'm at. So I can also just create a chat only looking at a certain, I have to unplug this, only looking at a certain project, and then it has only that context. Another way of working I personally prefer, I don't work so much with the Claude desktop app because I have, I think, much cooler setup, which is the Claudian plugin in Obsidian. So now you can see, and let me just open a new window so it's not confusing. So now you can see here my folder structure with all my daily logs, my projects. This is just my weekly reviews. I like to do weekly reviews. It's another skill I have, and that I also give out when I do consulting. And attachments is just a dumping ground for anything I want to give to the AI without having to find the appropriate folder. So the Claudian plugin is a really nice way to bring Claude into your Obsidian so that you can look at your Markdown files here in the middle. You can talk to it. You don't have to talk about this Markdown file that you have opened, although it will, with a new chat, it will bring that in as a suggestion already tagged. But this has access, this goes through the CLI, through the command line. So Claude Code. So this has access to most of your computer, which is this little YOLO here. And then one of the things you can do here is to have a good morning skill, which I love. So in the morning, I would just say, first thing, I would just say good morning. And this is how the good morning skill works. When I say good morning, it gets the current time. It reads the workspace, it reads the last 2 daily logs, it reads all my to-do lists, it reads my current project status, and it also creates a little daily AI briefing for me. And it reads my calendar, and then it basically just gives me a rundown of what I need to do and what I have planned. And I also have this new awesome skill that I created where I have a YouTube pipeline. So anything I want to learn, it keeps track of, and then it suggests 5 topics in the morning. So this is something I told it to do through the good morning skill. Suggest 5 topics of something that I could be learning. And then I select one topic, and then it runs this cool YouTube pipeline together with Gemini and brings up 5 videos of the topic I chose seen from different angles. So this is something you can do if you think about what do I want to do in the morning, what would be useful for where I'm at. You can add that to your good morning skill, and then you get that served every morning with your once you invoke the skill. So how can you make your second brain? Well, the large language models understand the concept of a second brain. So you could, with this information from this video, just talk to it and explain what you want to do. Say that what folder structure you would want, what's important to you. It understands what an AGENTS.md or CLAUDE.md is. It knows to write Markdown files. It knows to set up folder structures. So if you want to give it a try by yourself, just talk to it and see what it comes up with, and then look at the results. One thing I would say when working agentically is that other than when we were chatting to the ChatGPT or the Claude, I think most of us just really, like, we got back such a long list of text, but we would really only look at the, last 3, 4, 5 lines when working agentically. So when you work with the AI in your folders and it creates documentation for you, you really want to make sure to read that documentation. And I have even one skill that's a vault cleanup skill, and a vault is your that's your environment, right? So that's your folder. So you really want to make sure you understand what is inside of your second brain, because that is your context, and every word that is in there that takes up space also eats up tokens as soon as the LLM is directed at it. And it's also context that it works with. So if there's wrong information in there, or information that's outdated, or just not that great, the outcomes will be not as great. So the better, the more up to date, the cleaner, the sharper your vault is, your second brain is, your knowledge base is, the more precise the outcomes will be when you start working agentically. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know if you have questions, and let me know any other videos you want to see. I'm happy to do them.